Hi everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of Below the Fold, the new event series from Unfold, where we're looking to interview successful entrepreneurs and business leaders on a particular topic that's really central to their business. This being the first ever episode, we've had some minor technical difficulties, namely that I forgot to press record at the beginning. So we're about to pick up the action halfway through the first question to our fantastic guest, Zara Nanu, who is the CEO of Gapsquare and has recently been through the process of selling her business to an acquirer, XpertHR. So we're going to be talking about fundraising, the process of being acquired, and what comes next for her business. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope you find it useful. Oh, sorry, I did not realize I was going to do that, and I've also realized I didn't start the recording. Apologies, Laura.
That's okay. Atomica's reports were saying that it will be, that it's only 1% of VC funding in Europe goes to female founders. That is only 1p to every pound, so very little money. We have had a lot of support to put the pitch together, to talk about the business, to talk about the product, to talk about what we want to achieve, the vision, the scale. And I have pitched numerous times to investors, but what was happening all the time is I'd leave a room of investors with one sale of a license. So at one point, I just thought, actually, I must stop trying to pitch for investment and just go out and pitch for business. So we developed the first initial product quite quickly when we set up Gapsquare, and we had our first customer in First Bus here in Bristol, who has given us access to their data, and we were then able to run some prototypes, play with the data, understand what it could look like, what kind of insights we can start giving customers about fair pay, and then everything rolled from there. And we grew through growing our customer base and generating that recurring revenue through developing a software as a service that was then allowing us to slowly grow year on year. So we didn't see the hockey stick growth that you usually see with pitches and in investments, for investments, but we did see kind of steady, slow growth that got us to a team of 10 in 2021.
That's amazing. And did you find that because you didn't necessarily have that pressure from investors, that you had the opportunity to actually do things a little bit differently? Because often one of the pressures that comes with investment is we need to see that hockey stick growth curve. We need to see certain things happening, and they actually put the pressure on you to deliver that and actually do things perhaps as a founder that you wouldn't want to do. So did you find the opportunity to actually do things a bit differently as a result of the kind of funding path that you took?
I think it absolutely did, though quite quickly in the process, we have got a board for Gapsquare, and that board has acted as somewhat that kind of accountability in terms of, you are a business, you're bootstrapping, yeah, you're doing well, but actually you want to see growth, and what's the kind of growth that you want to achieve. So the board has acted as that kind of catalyst to help focus attention on the growth that we want to achieve, while I also my focus was on also trying to keep the company and the employees and the entire community of our stakeholders focused on what we're trying to achieve as a mission in terms of achieving fair pay, because that is ultimately what helped drive a lot of support and a lot of advocates and ambassadors around Gapsquare, and then raising the brand and getting the customers that we ended up getting.
Yeah, fantastic. And given that you have now been acquired, what do you think it was that didn't get investors engaged in that proposition? Because obviously they've missed out on a potential business acquisition now. So what would you have done something differently, or actually would you choose the kind of bootstrapping path, having been through that?
Absolutely, it's like there's pluses and there's minuses to everything. I think the bootstrapping is good because it gives you complete ownership and control over what you do with the company, and you can pivot into a direction that you see that would work without having to kind of have that conversation with investors and other stakeholders. But at the same time, it can be slow. I mean, it took us nearly 6 years to grow to a company of 10, whereas with investment support, it can take a year, less than a year. It can be until tomorrow that you're a team of 10. Not in the current like talent climate, because it's really hard to recruit and find good people right now. But yeah, it's a different model, and it's not for bootstrapping is not for everyone. It's hard. Sometimes when it's Thursday and you need to run payroll tomorrow and someone hasn't paid their invoices, it's hard.
Yeah, there's two sides to every coin, I guess, in that respect. On the topic of investment then, something I know from kind of personal conversations with you, and you've already touched on it here, actually being a female founder can make raising investment even more difficult. And I think it'd be really interesting and useful for our audience to hear a bit about, I guess, how that experience was for you, and then advice for how you would advise people in a similar position to overcome some of those challenges.
I think the investment landscape and the VC landscape is starting to address that slightly, because they're seeing the problem that 1% investment in female founders isn't necessarily because the female founders aren't there. They're there, they're just not getting the money. And it was really eye-opening to actually read some research from this amazing woman. She was at Columbia University, Dana Kantz. She has a TED talk about this, about women raising money, but also a lot of publications and papers. And she and the team, some colleagues from Columbia University, did an analysis of 10,000 pitches from Startup Grind to try and identify if men and women pitch differently. And what they found out is that men and women pitch the same. It's the same structure, it's the same points. It's like we all know what pitch decks look like, right? They're all the same. They're not very different between each other. But then they looked at the questions that investors ask founders, and they found that investors ask men and women different questions. So they ask women defensive questions, and they ask men positive reinforcement questions. So they will ask women questions like, why do you believe that by year 3 your financial model scales to this? How will you respond to competition? How big this market can get to you, considering that, and then put limitation factors around. Whereas the questions that were going to male founders were more along the lines, how can you see this? How many times will your business grow by 2025? What's the percentage of the market that you can capture in 5 years' time, and things like that. So more positive reinforcements, which then generated different kind of answers from men and women, and that resulted in a lot more men getting funding.
Yeah, that's a real challenge, isn't it? And difficult, but good to hear that things are changing. I think people, like you say, are more aware of that, and it's becoming a bigger part of the conversation. And as long as that's the case, and things are getting better, that's positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that research was really eye-opening to me, because it was then that I thought, actually, this is exactly what I'm experiencing. This is exactly why that I had that feeling of disempowerment after pitching every time, because it was more about trying to find holes in my approach, whereas the male founders have it the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom has actually just asked a very good question, almost taking the words right out of my mouth, which is kind of moving on to talk a bit about the process of being acquired and what it's like to, and how does that work? Because it's so intriguing to someone who has not been through that or kind of understanding it. So how did your acquirer actually find you as a business? Were you prospecting people to sell the business to? Do you just get a phone call one day? How does it work, and what did that process look like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, at the point where this kind of approach happened, we were in year 5, and we knew that something major needs to happen, because this slower growth also meant We have a lot of competition around us that is growing faster. There's a company in the US that does exactly the same thing as we do, and they've just raised $7 million. So for us, the time was ticking, and we knew that we needed to do something dramatic, and we were pretty much gearing up to try and do something creative. So that's always been our thing. There's a lot of challenges when you bootstrap, and you always try to think, how can you be creative so that you're one step ahead without having to invest a lot of resources and a lot of money. We have had 2 approaches before about 2 companies trying to acquire us. One was a competitor and the other one was a partner. They were just not the right time for us and not the right opportunities. In terms of conversations that were happening at the board level, we were starting to tease out what would scale look like, or what would exit look like? Because like I said, we were at a point where it was clear that something needs to happen. We have even explored a list of potential acquirers. The organization that ended up acquiring us was nowhere near that list. So what happened is they approached us in December 2020 for a partnership conversation. Okay. And then Sean, who was our VP for partnerships and growth, had this conversation with them, did a demo. They were really interested. They said they want a second demo to understand the software a bit more. And it was about taking Gapsquare to their customers and finding a way in which they can do that in a partnership way. And following that second demo, they have asked Sean to schedule a call for their CEO and myself, at which point Sean called me and said, I think they want to buy Gapsquare. So she's very clever, that one.
She saw it early.
Yes. So we started, I had my initial conversation with Scott, who is currently my boss, early January 2021. And we have completed that transaction in July.
Okay, so relatively quickly then for the kind of size of decision that's being made there.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you know that they were the right people to sell to? Because you mentioned you obviously had a few prospective bids. What stood out to you about XpertHR as the kind of person to buy Gapsquare and take it forward?
So they were already offering a gender pay gap solution, so a solution that was looking at pay inequality to a large number of customers. So that was giving us access to that customer pool. We aligned on value. We aligned on values. Ultimately, that's the big piece. We aligned on values in terms of how we value our own employees and our own teams and our own people. We aligned on values in terms of how do we support customers so that they can be more purposeful, better, inclusive workplaces for their employees. And this alignment was big in terms of deciding that we can work together. And we also aligned on our kind of vision for how this can be a more global mainstream solution to pay inequality. And we can do that at scale quite quickly. So when we were talking about how we're going to scale, getting investment to scale would have allowed us to grow our team in time. But by being acquired, we immediately were part of a company that has 30,000 employees around the world. So it's a different kind of scale.
Yeah, that's certainly a different kettle of fish, isn't it? Tom's got another really good question actually, which I think rolls on quite nicely. How did you agree your valuation, and what method do you use to kind of come up with that figure? Because I know there's lots of different ways of potentially arriving at that number, but it's tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky, and there was a little bit of a dance around that in terms of how much do you value yourselves versus I don't know, how much do you value us? So there was some of that conversation. Luckily, we had people on our board who've done this before, and they were able to participate in those conversations and try and tease out and highlight more of the value. And that's what we did, a lot of that, highlighting the value, not just in the customer base that we have, but also in the product, also in the vision, also in the capabilities and possibilities of what we can do together to get to a valuation. So it was, it's not easy, but
Did the number change? Did it change much over the course of the negotiation, or once it's kind of out there, was that sort of that's where we settled?
That's where we settled, because we took there was a lot of due diligence that has happened even before the valuation conversation, because there was a lot of processes that need to kind of be checked and verified and some research done. So it took quite a few good months to actually see the number on paper. But what it meant from their point of view, having done some of the due diligence, they felt really comfortable with the offer that they made us. And ultimately, it's an offer that worked for us. So,
yeah. Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about what that actually means for Gapsquare going forward. So you're now part of XpertHR, which is in turn part of LexisNexis. Is that correct? Yes. The right structuring? Yeah. So like you say, a massive company going from 10 people up to kind of all the resource to pull on. And I guess that's meant a lot of change. So my first question would be like, what has that change been, and where have you seen the biggest differences in the way that you operate now?
We don't use Zoom, we use Microsoft Teams. So that is one, that's just a joke kind of change, but the change has been significant. And it's really, really interesting to see the dynamics of that change. We have been a small company and therefore quite agile and quick to change and pivot and try new things and be more creative. And we thought joining a large corporation is going to slow us down, but in fact, it's given us a platform of where change happens at scale. Everything happens quite quickly, things move and shift, and it's just about delivering same good quality in a fast-paced environment, which I think is really interesting for the entire team. We have had the teams disperse into their respective functions. So we've had our marketing team join the XpertHR marketing team, and the sales team join the sales team, and the product team go into the product team. So that has also allowed those functions to start to develop quicker, because they're surrounded by more people who do similar thing, where you can tap into resource that's very specific to your job. It has also meant that we have had to learn quite quickly how to stop being jack of all trades and start focusing on very specific roles where we can be more excellent in what we do and not get distracted and deliver a lot of value by staying focused on one thing. It's not always easy when you're used to doing everything from product to sales to everything in between. It's hard. From my point of view, I don't have to do VAT returns anymore. Yay! Nor do I have to talk to HMRC about delayed PAYE. Is this being recorded? Yeah. I don't, there's a lot of kind of things that were part of my job before that are no longer part of my job now, actually allowing me to do more of the things that I enjoy, like talking to you today or reaching out to possible partners and taking Gapsquare to the next more scalable level, identifying talent around the world who can join our team, work in business development, work in product, facilitate partnerships for us. So it's really exciting and actually quite interesting to learn how a large corporation works. It's an interesting experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. So lots of pros, lots of plus sides. There must have been some like downsides, and I guess one of the things that can be quite tricky is like maintaining that innovation. When you're a really small team, you can be very agile, you can make decisions quite independently, roll things out very quickly. So are there any downsides to kind of being in a bigger company, and how are you going to retain that kind of innovation and agile nature to the work that you're doing?
So it's obviously like some days are great and some days are harder, but it's all part of the learning process. And everyone in our team is currently learning something every day. I think one of the things that we partly miss, and I think it's the stage through which we're working. We're trying to re-find each other because everyone being dispersed in different teams, but we're still all working on Gapsquare, and it's kind of re-finding that time and that space to be a community again, a Gapsquare community in a way. So that has been slightly more challenging. But when it comes to innovation, maybe less time to innovate, but a bit more time to go in depth and go a bit more in depth on a specific thing and really try it out and really acquire a bigger customer base and develop that is the kind of the other side of the coin that I think quite enjoyable for the team right now.
Yeah, I can imagine that being, everything gets supercharged, doesn't it, in that sense. So that's really fantastic. What else do we want to ask? Like I say, we've got the Q&A, so if anyone wants to pop anything in there, please do. We've had one question, which was, how has the acquisition affected your role in the business? But I feel like we've probably covered that off quite nicely already. So hopefully that answers.
I'd add something
okay, yeah.
in there. It has changed because CEO of Gapsquare, a lot of the kind of my time was internally on the internal stakeholders, trying to keep everyone aligned onto what Gapsquare is trying to do and trying to keep everyone together and focused on the end mission, and with external stakeholders kind of continuously remind them of why we're here and elevating the brand and what Gapsquare is. But right now my role is also to work within a larger organization and bring a lot of other stakeholders who work in other sides of the business to support Gapsquare and the growth of Gapsquare. So that I don't have to do VAT returns anymore. That's great. But on the other hand, there's a lot of other people who are my peers or my superiors in the organization who I have to bring on this Gapsquare journey, convince them that it's the right thing to do new projects, see where things need to change.
Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. And we've got one question from Nick Sturge. Hi, Nick. And he says, would you have done anything different in your 6 years? A big question.
Oh, it's I'm one of those annoying people who does not necessarily think, oh, I should have done that differently, because I see everything as learning, as a learning opportunity, and say, if I would have pitched differently to investors and focused more on the financial returns, perhaps that would have gotten the investment. But the learning that came from doing things differently and not as in fitting with the mold has allowed me to learn and develop strengths and be where I am today and taking the team with us on this journey. So I'm not sure that there is anything that I would have done different.
Well, I mean, that's good, isn't it? Got to be happy with where you've got to, and I think it's been fantastic to watch that journey and see Gapsquare grow so quickly in such a space of time. So I guess to sort of wrap up, then I'd like to know what comes next for Gapsquare. We talked about it briefly, I guess, while we were just chatting before we kind of officially got started, but what's the vision for Gapsquare and where are you going next?
I guess one of the key things that I always used to say to a question like this before was go big or go home, and we're going big. But this time we really are going big. And as you know, we're taking the product to the US. We're looking at a more global approach, and we're looking at actually what we're doing in terms of scaling Gapsquare to the extent that it becomes mainstream in delivering pay fairness to companies around the world. And it's really, it's an exciting times. Finally, it's that manifestation of go big or go home is happening. It's we're bringing it to life.
Fantastic. Well, go big. And I think it's going to be fantastic. So I'm going to do one last call for questions. So pop those either in the chat or on the Q&A, and we can make the most of Zara's time while she's here. While people are typing that out, I can tell you about our next event, which is happening this time next month, so second Thursday of the month. We've got Siddy, who is one of the co-founders of Why Hangry, joining us. They are a startup which does private chefs straight to your home. Completely different world. They're taking London by storm at the moment. They went on Dragon's Den, they got money from both Peter and Tej, and they've also just been accepted onto Y Combinator. So we're going to be finding out about that experience. So that will be, I'm sure Ellie will be sending out an email after this with the details of that. So be sure to join us for that one. We have another question in. So here we go. So in the early stages of founding the team, how did you manage to bring people on board who were aligned with your vision?
So I think it was first of all, I'm definitely joining next webinar. Private chefs coming to your home, cooking delicious food. I'm in. How can we make this big in Bristol? I'm sure we can make this big in Bristol. It's such a foodie city.
Yeah, well, maybe we can convince them.
Yeah. So in terms of getting people in, the getting people aligned with the mission and the vision was the easy part. I think the part where we always try to be careful is about, not careful, but more strategic, is about getting people who are smarter than us or better than us in some areas where we don't necessarily excel, which is why we ended up with an excellent team in marketing and business development and partnership development. I mean, we operate in a world where increasingly doing social good, creating pay fairness, pay equality is a common thing for anyone. People can get behind this mission because it is the right thing to do. And I think where we excelled in building that team is bringing in people who align on the vision, but also who are complementing or complementary to our gaps as founders, because I co-founded the business with you. And so it was about finding people who can do things better than us. And it still is now. We're looking to recruit new people in the US and other parts of the world. And I've interviewed someone yesterday who I thought, she's so brilliant. She's 10 times better than I am. I definitely want her to be part of the team. So it's about getting people in who are better than you, I think.
Yeah, I think I can definitely resonate with that as an answer. You know Tom well, Zara, who's our first hire at Unfold, and you know it changes the game, doesn't it? When you're bringing in people around you who are fantastic at what they do, it just transforms what you're able to achieve as an organization, and getting those different skill sets and complementary skill sets together makes a massive difference. So thank you for that. We've got a few I've got coming through on the Q&A as well. So the first one is, do you have any advice for other women wanting to navigate acquisition, how to handle biases, etc.?
It's a difficult one. One of the key recommendations for me, I want to say growing up as a founder, was to take a man to be a representative in the room, because then and a man who will be saying the same things as you are, obviously. I don't think that necessarily has to happen. So that was a piece of advice that was given to me. But I think the key thing is to just stay true to your values and what you're trying to achieve. And that's it. It was one of the I didn't watch the Brits, but I saw
who
got upcoming artist.
Was it Little Sims?
Yes, Lil Sims, and her talk at the end was just absolutely inspiring. She was saying, like, to everyone in the council estate who is Black, thinking like, how can I ever be on a stage at the Brits? I am you and you are me, and it's possible. And that's all I want to say to any female founder. It's possible. Stay true to your vision, stay true to your values. The more of us do that, the more of us we will be in the space that are funded, in the space that exit businesses, in the space that bootstrap successful businesses.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, yeah, well said. And as Joyanne just added on the chat, she was an independent artist as well. So I don't think she's even signed to a record label, which makes the achievement even more incredible. So yeah, some fantastic advice there. What else have we got here? So, well, this question actually says, do you think you could have done it as a solo founder? But as you've just kind of alluded to, you are actually a co-founder of Gapsquare.
Yeah. So the support of my co-founder has been invaluable. I've started a business in tech without any kind of tech experience, and not having someone shoulder to shoulder, the tech side, who I could trust and who could trust me that we could build the commercial, would have been harder. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's yeah, just having the right people around you, doesn't it, makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
I've got one last question here, which I will promote up onto the screen, which is there a next for you as for the mission or the idea? Is there going to be new feature developments for Gapsquare on the horizon? And can you tell us about them?
So we're looking at kind of how we can deliver value to companies in terms of looking into utilizing data and machine learning, specifically with the view of creating pay fairness in a changing world of work. We have a world of work where we have inherited jobs that we pay because of stereotypes from the 1950s. So we have certain occupations that are female dominated, certain occupations that are male dominated. They pay very differently. The more male dominated roles pay more, the more female dominated roles pay less. And we're building a future of work currently in a very digital economy that is very much tech heavy, and that's very much a sector dominated by men. So we're looking into how we can be more innovative with how we utilize data to not only be able to help companies understand their current differences in pay, but understand how changes in the workforce will create differences of pay in the future and future-proof their own models so that they actually proactively create more equality amongst their employees.
Fantastic. Well, I think that is an excellent question and answer to end today's session on. So really that just leaves me to say thank you so much, Zara, for sharing some of your time with us today. And yeah, incredibly insightful. I know everyone will have found that really, really valuable insight. So thank you for coming along.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for being as lovely as always.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. So we will send around what I managed to grab of the recording. Sorry again for interrupting you there. Ellie will be going mad at me for not doing that from the start, but we'll send that around. Yeah, we'll share the details of the next event, which, as I said, is coming up next month. So brilliant. Thank you so much. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Harry. Thanks, everyone. Bye.